with May, and I'm one half the team that wrote Seven Devils. My other half is Laura Lamb, and Seven Devils is about seven resistance fighters trying to bring down an empire where loyalty is coded from birth. So today I will be reading a passage from Seven Devils. It takes place 10 years in the past, because Seven Devils is a non-linear storytelling book, and we wanted to show some of the background situations for each of our seven devils. So this is Princess Discordia's chapter, and it takes place 10 years ago. The Trading Academy on Mindalia was a prison made of gold and glass. Up! A slap across the face jolted Discordia awake. She shook her head to clear it. Sorry, Mistress Horaya. The paper blurred in front of her eyes. She had been awake for 4 days in this room, with its single desk, surrounded by the glass walls of the training academy. It overlooked the clouds, tinged pink and orange with the rise of the twin suns. Sometimes Discordia wished she could open these windows, spread a pair of wings, and fly. Mistress Horaya snatched the book off the desk. Recite Chapter 5 for me precisely. Thalassian history. The reign of the fifth Archon. He had expanded his empire well beyond the Thalassian solar system, ruthlessly conquering planet after planet. It was his idea to engineer a cohort of royal children, each with the potential of becoming his successor. Natural-born male heirs were too risky. All it took was one spoiled lackwit with more bluster than sense to lose control over the empire he'd built. No, the fifth Archon decided his royal cohort should be engineered to his exact specifications, trained up to his brutal standards, and forced to compete for the throne until only two were left standing. One to be heir of the galaxy, to lead the charge against the Evoli threat and defeat their enemy once and for all, and the other the trusted right hand. Still royalty, but no Archon. The spare. That had been the tradition for hundreds of years, down to Discordia's own father, the 10th Archon. After more than 100 years as ruler, Discordia's father began growing his potential successor. The first 3 batches of 100 were failures. The first 2 never made it out of the vats. The third survived and grew to age 16. They began dueling as they should for a title. The heir and spare were named, but they killed each other less than a year later. That was not supposed to happen. They were meant to respect the final decision, to set aside their bloodlust and work together. Discordia was part of the 4th cohort. 100 children had been grown in vats, 50 assigned male at birth, and 50 female, just like all the others. Only 51 had survived through childhood. Discordia was the only female left. Mistress Horaya, as cruel as she was, had placed her bet on Discordia precisely because she was the only female to make it past age 6. She instructed Discordia in all areas, intellectual, physical, and emotional, that would lead to her becoming the best candidate, the strongest, the fastest, the one who lived. Discordia shut her eyes and recited the chapter verbatim. Her prefect didn't smile. She didn't congratulate her. Mistress Horaya gathered her bag and digital tablet before saying, "Come with me." Where? Discordia just wanted to sleep. Where else? Mistress Horaya raised an eyebrow. To the gymnasium. Discordia pressed her teeth together against the urge to beg for sleep. Practice? To start. The prefect's gaze sharpened. Combat training this morning? History and philosophy this afternoon? And this evening, you run. When can I? Discordia pressed her lips together. She hadn't meant to ask aloud, to betray how vulnerable she was. Sleep? Mistress Horaya finished. Her eyes narrowed and she pressed her fingers to the desk. There will be no rest in war, Discordia. Every soldier will depend on you to keep your mind sharp when you're most exhausted. So you will run until I tell you to stop. And when your breath threatens to choke you, you will recite chapter 5 for me again. Then, once I'm satisfied, I'll consider letting you sleep. Discordia ran until the suns reached their zenith in the Mindalian sky. They shone through the windows of the gymnasium and the trees planted to create the illusion of an outside. Not once did Discordia fall. Not once did she pause and give Mistress Haraya the opportunity to thrash her for her failure. Not like her siblings, all of them had at some point during their training allowed their prefects to beat them into unconsciousness, just for sleep. Every sibling except for Damocles. After Discordia recited the chapter through her hard, heavy breathing, she looked up at the raised observation deck. She knew Damocles would be there. Every child of the Archon was encouraged to watch each other train in the small amount of free time they were given, first to find each other's weaknesses, then eventually to exploit them. Though they were not permitted to kill each other at the academy, it was where the royal cohort began viewing one another as competition and as potential victims. Their eyes met. Damocles nodded once and held up one finger, then another. A message passed down from the Archon to all of his potentials. Damocles wanted to form an alliance. He came to Discordia's room later, after another grueling day of training. Mistress Haraya had finally allowed her to eat and then sleep. Discordia opened the door shortly after dinner. She froze when she saw him. Though still a 14-year-old boy growing in his gangly limbs, he towered over her. His gaze was penetrating, a beam sharper than any Moor's laser. He constantly measured the people around him, whether they were a danger or, more likely, how quickly he could kill them. She scanned the hallway and ushered him inside. "Hurry! You were awake for 5 days," he said as she closed the door. He sounded almost accusatory. "How did you do that?" Discordia kept her voice cool. "Sheer force of will." Damocles scanned her room, clean, white, and sterile as a prison cell. The only personal object she kept in her room was the round Zatrakion board on the desk, still in the same positions that she and Mistress Haraya had left them. The prefect always played the king, and Discordia the queen. It was a game of strategy, of careful calculation meant to reproduce the moves one might make in war. She had another 12 hours to make her decision. If she won, she ate again. If she didn't, she starved. This was how they played, and Mistress Haraya was a master at it. "Do you play?" Discordia asked, noting how he studied each piece. "Not often." Accusatory again. "It seems my prefect is useless." Every prefect was a former member of the Royal Guard, all trained to be the best soldiers in the Empire. Each one had picked their trainee among the royal cohort, and those who had first picked always went with the male children. A woman had never been Archon. A woman had never made it through training without dying. But soldiers all had vulnerabilities and strengths. Some prefects emphasized battle. Some emphasized strategy. Mistress Haraya was determined to teach Discordia everything, and if she ended up dying, then she wasn't strong enough to begin with. "You indicated you wanted to form an alliance," Discordia said, impatient. "Did you mean it? Would I be here if I didn't? Then who would be the heir?" Her unasked question was just as important. Who would be the spare? The other was lucky enough to live, but they would never be as valued, never as vital, never as recognized. Damocles shrugged as if it didn't matter. Didn't fool her. Whoever was better. He kept staring at the Zatrakion board, never at her. Finally, she grew impatient. "Did you want to play?" Yes, I do." They sat there afternoon after afternoon between their training, often exhausted, strategizing and figuring out each other's weaknesses. She learned that Damocles didn't like losing. She learned that he considered it a weakness. She learned that he grew impatient easily, and that when he sensed he wouldn't win, he made stupid mistakes. And she learned that he hated hearing her say the same words when she won every time. Regina Regem Nicat. Queen kills king. And that is a small bit from Seven Devils, which is in bookshops now. Thank you.